for illumined life to be birthed into form. I am the truth. I am the light. Illumined, beloved divine.
So hello there everyone, and welcome to another video with me here today. As you can see, I'm back in my elven forest. This is a beautiful place, lots of elementals here. So I wanted to be in this pure presence because what I want to talk about today is quite intense, and we know a lot about these things already, and I've been amping up gradually, preparing the field, each time revealing a little bit more, because as you know, my motto is there's always something more. We're always going deeper into the very nature of life, the fabric of creation. And as we're waking up, as you know, awakening is not a singled out event, just like Ascension isn't as well. Waking up is, first of all, we have to understand an individually designed, specifically uniquely created soul experience that each, let's say, volunteer soul, there's a lot of angelic beings now coming into this framework of reality. Well, many are here. And each of these soul experiences is uniquely designed with their own challenges, initiations, and this, of course, includes the journey of understanding both light and the dark in order to move beyond the polarity experiment, because that's what this entire earth has been about for so long. You all probably are aware of the book Bringers of the Dawn, which was one of the pioneering books on this field, I believe, and the agendas and how the human reality was hijacked, how this beautiful human creation began with light beings, and then humanity and their development and its own evolutionary pathway was infiltrated by those beings who are often called Lizzies or reptilians, right? But there's many different beings and types of beings that actually participated in this Earth's reality, because what I'm shown is from the grand design perspective, what we sometimes call the divine plan. There was a great need to understand unity through diversity, and we're still going through this. And a part of this unity and diversity means coming back to love and bringing back the original teachings of impeccable understanding about the immaculate nature of life and how the basic universal principles of life are, and respecting all paths and all purposes, because every single element of the game has its own purpose. So when you're waking up as an individual soul being, you're also part of something greater, right? Because the more you're waking up, the more you're remembering that there's teams of light and legions of light of beings who are here supporting us. So each time we're less alone on our journey of ascension. But there's also a tremendous pressure, and it feels like, well, it's the truth that it becomes, it is a part of what becomes this holographic reality, the imprint of the matrix, which, if you imagine, like, it's a bubble, and it has different programs running simultaneously within it. So as you're waking up throughout your journey, you're going to wake up to each and every time to a different program. So you're waking up within the program, becoming less and less numbed down, and it's like a lid cap, right? It's like if you're always wanting to overflow, but you feel like there's a lid pressing upon you. This is how these holograms actually work. Sorry, guys. So first thing to know is that our experience was created. It was designed by us, and each and every one of our experiences is a part of divine plan, and it's a part of the nature of how God is love. And we are here remembering that the truth we hold is also not just coming through light, but the love we have for that truth, right? So we're going to talk about this today, and the meaning of false ascension, which was an infiltrated reality. As we all know, that the so-called forces of darkness have infiltrated every single aspect of human reality. like every single one of them, right? I will prepare further training once. It will be another mini course for free tutorial for all of you. But right now I want to talk about this and how these realities were hijacked, and the importance of understanding Ascension as an organic pathway and the embodiment of what Ascension truly means. Because we're going to talk about the body importance specifically today, because, you know, the false Ascension timeline was truly an infiltrated reality that presented Ascension through, you know, a lot of teachings that they do hold truth within it. And that's how, you know, the status quo functions are going to give you, like, they're going to spoon feed you like 80% of the truth, while the most important aspects remain hidden. And that's the aspect that you most vitally need to actually come to the next level. So this, I'm going to present it more galactically, right? So this original golden light ascension was hijacked and it was infiltrated. So as you know, these lineages of these beings who came here, and some of these beings we also know as reptilian beings, they're part of artificial intelligence. So they were themselves infiltrated, you know, themselves became like a fallen aspect that developed through what we call artificial intelligence. And artificial intelligence, as you know, it always needs a host. It needs an organic component so it can continue with its agenda and its own expansion, but that expansion does not come through creation of life, through life principles. We've talked about this before. So this, right, interjection actually aligned the body and the brain, because the brain is like this receptacle, right, of the cosmic light, with the so-called, you know, in many books they're referenced as black and belittled sun agendas instead of like golden suns. And these teachings presented Ascension and this infiltration, specifically coming through many New Age teachings. Ascension became a ladder that you need to climb, right? And this ladder experiment also means that you need to, like, God is something outside of you, and it's this being or this cosmic entity, and you can never fully reach it, because this ladder, in a way, it's infinite, right? Infinite stairway to heaven. Not really the case. In truth, it's a spiral. It's an organic spiral, and life is organic. So that's when you really have a major awakening, you're actually, you know, there's a lot of pre-awakening experiences that many soul beings will have, but there isn't as an important awakening such as the awakening to the body and the truth of organic ascension, which I made a video about, calling it the feminine part of ascension, right? So this ladder was also accompanied by several teachings, like different masters. I'm not saying that the being we called ascended masters exist, but these were distorted, like holographic versions of these beings. And I think in my artificial intelligence videos, I've talked about this before, as well as my illumined cognition training. So also what we call the White Brotherhood, and I was shown this galactically through my own memory that I was traveling through the spiral of my soul. The White Brotherhood was also presented as a false, kind of like something that we perceive as purely benevolent, but it wasn't so. So through my Cosmic Christ teachings that I received from Spirit, the Cosmic Christ is simply a unity, a field of unity of beings who serve the principle of Cosmic Christ. However, the fake or the infiltrated White Brotherhood was truly, I talk about White Brotherhood as well, but from the creation perspective as it was originally held in its immaculate illumined design. But there was fractions, right? I told you that there's beings who fragmented. They went their own path of exploration. So this aspect, and what Spirit showed me, there was an aspect of beings who they didn't want to bring love to different realities of life. And life is structured dimensionally. So when you're truly ascending with the spiral, you need to ascend through all dimensional aspects and then bringing them to align with the dimensional aspects that your body resides with, right? And this is when we talk about fifth dimension versus fifth density, for example, right? So this fraction of beings, they didn't want that. They wanted to stay put. And they didn't have the same respect for, let's say, lower densities. They're not lower or lesser. But there's simply different densities, right? So this false notion of things being higher or lower in order and hierarchies created, it created a false understanding. There is a hierarchical nature to Spirit and how divine design works, but it's not linear in any way. It's most definitely not a ladder. And this spiral of ascension is like the Divine Mother and the Divine Father knowing of life. And I talked to you about illumined union being like this. And every point there is a so-called separation and coming back into unity, but only for the purpose of going or growing deeper into who we are as God. And God is this love, and it operates through all of us. So this distortion, this false belief was initially incepted with the idea that, you can never truly ascend. You made an attempt to ascend, and you need to work for it. And you need to work for the light. And there's always more light needed, more light, more to do. And this is what I shared with you through the experience that I had with these so-called, you can say negative light beings, but I don't call them negative. They're simply different in the way they perceive life. So for me, the way they understand reality is still from separation. So they might be like higher density beings than we humans. Doesn't mean they're more evolved, So this is how life is supposed to be seen. When you start plugging off of that hijacked reality, which is in every fabric of this life, right? And everything is being told to us through the narrative of the matrix instead of the narrative of source. But what this also created is the belief in many beings, especially those who are very much prone to the light, because they always had this purity within them to seek God and to seek nature and to commune, the nature of God, and to commune with it, And this created, it's kind of like they were more prone to become highly susceptible to this creation of this idea of isolation and need to isolate to reach God or divinity, which, it's still being experienced nowadays, but especially when you look at the times in the past, with the people experiencing these lifetimes of being a monk or a nun, and when they reincarnate, they still have either themselves or when they imprint upon a lineage, they have these feelings, right? So remember again that the spiral of ascension is organic. It doesn't demand anything of you. It doesn't tell you need to achieve this kind of level before you get to that kind of level. And then, it's just natural. And the way you approach that is through love, anchoring more and more love. Because in truth, people still forget this very simple fact that you cannot anchor light, even in our physical bodies, without holding a space of love first. That's where we're going to talk about the importance of the body and body ascension today, a little more. So these beings who simply serve the nature of cosmic Christ, they're not told what to do. No one tells them, and no one tells you, you have to go here in these worlds of creation because they're in trouble. It's simply your own sovereign choice. Because when you expand within the light of Christ, you expand within love. And your love wants to always share itself. It wants to amplify. And it's like love is naturally, the nature of source is like it's all things, it's all life, right? So the more you expand into the very nature of source, the more you become this cosmic server of life, right? Aligned with that. And it's just natural and organic. But why this was so difficult, especially for so many beings who are within the light working or light worker community or, blueprint, I don't even know how to call it. But it's more difficult to them because they always had this desire, right? They always had this desire to know God. And for them, it's even more difficult because they're usually seeking themselves through any form of meditation and so. But the problem is now, I'm going to talk about this one, why many light beings, especially very pure beings, are having issues, and especially physical body issues, because of these imprints. So I'm a specific way, right? And I come from a specific density. And then there's rays of beings and specific waves that, let's say, volunteer souls also came here to incarnate. I'm not, this doesn't just relate to volunteer souls, but there's these successive ways, even within humanity, even people who were originally evolving with the evolutionary design of the planet, and we so know them as the human souls. They're still divine souls, but from the level of evolutionary creation, right? We affiliate them with the evolutionary nature of this planet, and they were here since the beginning of planetary design and evolution. So they're also coming in different ways. They're also expanding more and more. So this is concise for all, right? Because Ascension, like I said, it's multidimensional. It's not linear in any way. So these beings, these tremendous light beings, often they're called angel or angelic souls. They're usually incarnating into Christ bloodlines or Christ lineages. What does this mean? We know that the Christ, when he came here, that's why he came within the zero timeline, because he literally reset the timelines. That's when everything started shifting tremendously. So he also created offspring, which was, as you know, hidden from the main record books, because he was, just as much as he was the divine being and sent here on a mission, he was also a human. a beautifully loving human being who created a bloodline with his counterpart in that lifetime, which we know as Mary Magdalene. So when these beings kept on incarnating in these lineages, because so much was done through this imprint, right? This field of the matrix was always against these beings of the light because they were dangerous, right, to the status quo. And we've talked about this before, how these beings were so often enslaved, tortured for their knowledge, like, you know, for their gifts. And I know many beings like that who are so pure, they're so loving, they're so beautiful, but they still hold a lot of fear memory about these lifetimes. And even if you're a volunteer soul and you didn't have lifetimes here before, but you still carry imprints, you had to take these on. You can't just come here for the first time not knowing anything about Earth. So you would imprint through different experiences, but mostly you receive the entire bloodline or ancestral lineage that is behind you. But remember the rule that we, and how Spirit shows me, we're always all that was before us plus one. We're definitely the strongest link that ever incarnated before, because each successive lineage is stronger, right? So a lot of these beings, tremendously pure beings, they were incarnating into these Christ bloodlines in order to do the clearing, which meant they re-experienced a lot of this traumatic suffering and all of that, which includes patterns, contracts, agreements also. Some of them also agreements with the darkness, so the darkness wouldn't harm them when they would continue to expand more. Torture, you know, re-experiencing all of that in order to one day, which is now, this now timeline, they would reawaken to that and remember that even though they might still hold elements of frustration and doubt, that this is simply a part of that programming. It's not a voice coming from their soul. If you're truly a volunteer soul, for example, your soul nature is so loving, is so pure, that when you say, well, that's my doubt, I have it, you don't have it, you imprint it upon it, right? So you need to experience this, because these are your initiations when you're going to actually break through. And I talk about these levels of the matrix that we need to break through. And each time when we do, there's an opposition there. And that's why usually when these amazingly pure beings start to wake up, they're going to experience a tremendous amount of attack on them, because the status quo and these beings, they don't want them to open up more, because we become a threat, right? We're very dangerous because they don't want us to come into our full power. So these agreements and patterns, a lot of them are also linked with the dark entities or demonic entities, which we know they perform psychic attack. I again would recommend you the Susan Ashley's video, how to deal with psychic attacks, because it's very important. This is kind of like now a collective theme. Everything is coming up about psychic attacks now. So I think this is so important. So Spirit revealed to me a higher perspective that I'll share today. But it's important you get, like, gradually start understanding these things, because, you know, a lot of people, especially light workers, they're like this. They don't know, you know, and I'm realizing that a lot of people who are not even resonating with these light worker things, they're just normal people doing their normal things, but they're more awake sometimes because they're more connected with Earth. And there's like a net that would hold these light worker beings through these agreements, through keeping them back, in order, you know, to not wake up further. And many people who think, that's it, I'm a light worker, but they don't even know what's happening on the planet, for example, right? You know what I'm talking about, right? So if you don't know, follow the movement that's now happening, and it's exposing a lot of these things, because if you're truly an awake being, you know yourself, you know your own divine plan, but you also see. You don't have to be with any of these things like specifically, but you know what's happening. Spirit is guiding you to be woken up to that part of reality too, because you are on Earth. So this imprint included a lot of distortion of body importance. The importance of the body is in its sense, right? It includes anchoring love. So when you see light workers talking about, I'm sending you light, oh, we're gonna do this light against dark, it's always this versus that. It's always duality. It continues to perpetuate more duality. There's so few people who talk about anchoring love. Jesus the Christ was one of these beings, and there's this whole book of love that he passed on to his daughter Sarah, right? And most of the teachings in Bible, they were re-edited, and they didn't even come from him. You know, there's very minimum percentage. There's always these beings, we don't even know who they were, right? They're just these men, usually men, telling you things and, you know, how it is and how it's supposed to be. There's very little that was left there. And even that was kind of like kept in very filtered version. The feminine, right? The feminine aspect of life, holding the space, that womb, and the masculine, we've talked about this before, they need to work together. The body, in that term, the body is our love child. The body is our child divine. It's the child of grace. It's the union of our masculine and feminine self. So if we negate the body, and there's where a lot of this distortion and manipulation is coming from these beings who are keeping a lid on these very pure souls. Because what I want to say is, when we're incarnating now on this planet, we're each doing it through less and less of a veiled experience. Like when I was born, I had to go through more density than these waves of beings coming in now. But there's also a trickiness to it, because these beings are even, it's like lighter and lighter, which makes you kind of like want to escape and move back to, like, let's say, a place of home. And you don't want to come, and you don't want to drop fully into the essence of earth. And when you're trying to seek your mission, but you're always wanting to go up instead of coming down, because that's what the mission is. The mission is for you to be you, the highest, most empowered version of you, that it's a part of your own divine plan. That's where you also developed your own part of the plan, the points of deception you're going to have to break through, the points of illusion, seeing behind the veil, like standing strong and tall against when these oppressions come, right? When there's a resistance, it usually means you're right at the tipping point of a major breakthrough, and that's what people don't know. And many beings think that's, oh, it's so scary, so they will run away. And Susan spoke about that as well, how many beautiful beings actually get afraid when they first start having major experiences, because they don't understand that that's also a part of their training and a part of the initiation. And I've talked about this before, how light initiates differently than the dark, and the initiations of the dark are so important for us to actually have our space, our voice, our presence on this earth. Without it, we're just like beams of light, like shooting off aimlessly, right? That's what happens. We don't have that focal integral presence. We don't become a divine integral sovereign being. So the importance of the body was hidden, because the feminine principle was hidden, and the spirit and the body are truly one, and that was the biggest distortion. So when you're not holding love for your human counterpart, when you're not loving yourself, you're not loving your body, all you want to do is meditate all day and escape. This is usually what these beings actually want. So when you get a point of infiltration is usually when you're starting to break free, and you're starting to break through that, and you're starting to remember love, or you have visions or dreams or guidance coming from illumined beings that are telling you, look further. This is who you truly are. And I know a lot of beings, including myself, we come across this intense doubt. But let me tell you, this doubt is an inception point. It doesn't come from our soul. But it's also, there is an experience for our learning, because we have to see it for what it is. As long as we're telling ourselves, yeah, it's my internal thing, you know, I have to be okay with it, it's just a part of who I am. No, it's not a part of who we are as divine beings, but it is part of our experience. That's the difference, and we need to see it for what it is. So there was an agenda to not fully come into our bodies as a light being and become fully integrated sovereign being, especially with these newer waves, right? The younger ones. And when I say younger, I don't mean young souls. I mean beings who are now physically younger than my generation or older generation. They're experiencing more challenges from that perspective, because they're even more sensitive. They usually have tremendously developed gifts of sensitivity. They can feel, see, sense, smell things very easily, right? They can feel the energy. But it's like this lid that's constantly pressing. It's like it doesn't allow, but that's a part of the challenge, because any being who wants to become an integral master of themselves, they need to learn how to break through these energies. And it's not as complex or complicated or even scary as it might look, as these beings, the dark beings, are just trying to present a false mirage image. It's not a true reality, because it's not scary. It is, you know, when you remember yourself as a light being, how badass you truly are, all of this is like, come on, you remember it's a distortion, and then nothing can go against you, because in that moment you are in such a full power, in such a full resonance, and that power comes from love. And when you try to move and work only with the light, you're going to fail each time. And that's what I think Susan beautifully explains Because she says when you're trying to go into the light and beam light to these energies that go against you, or try to send them back to the light, it doesn't work because they're not of the light. It's not for you to send them there. So she also mentioned how you're actually exposing yourself. You're actually shining even brighter, and they're loving that because they see you, and it's not for you to do. So when she started talking about love, it actually clarified what Spirit was showing me and what I had in my dream. Remember last year, it was probably around a year ago, when there were these higher dimensional beings. They weren't entities. There were these higher dimensional beings who wanted to basically suck off my life force as I was sleeping. They coming by surprise, and I made a video like an ego spirit is born or something like that. And the only way I was able to conquer them, like I couldn't fight back. It wasn't even an option, right? And then the next day I remembered, because I woke up, I'm like, oh my God, I'm still alive, because I clearly remember the entire experience. And then I asked Spirit, what did I do? What did I do, right? And I shared that in the video. And I actually confronted the being at the level of source. I said to them, look, I know who you truly are. And it's like, it was a mirror. And if they're not ready to see that they come from the same source, they just developed into something else, and they've chosen a different path, in their own level of experience, they're going to go away. They don't wish to see that. So love is the only way, and I'm going to explain today why. Because as a light being, you're not integrated through light alone. Light alone can be almost like you're trying to fill a vessel with light, but that vessel can't hold it. If you imagine a vessel, it needs a strong cup. If you're very specifically, let's say, a powerful light being, you're also going to need a very powerful body. That's why I always was very physically active. I was trained. I was hiking mountains. All these things I had to. They kept telling me, you need to be physically strong. You need to be physically strong. And there was a period in my life where I did nothing but hike the mountains. And this was to prepare me for my mission to come. And I was doing lots of running and things like that, right? Later, it softened because my mission changed, the cycle changed. But I want to say is that you would ruin yourself in your vessel. And that's what a lot of people, I even had one telling me that someone they knew died when they closed themselves into this room, and all they did, they meditated. Literally, they left their body. They couldn't stay in the body. So it's kind of like a separation is created here. It's like these beings enjoy when we're not fully inhabiting our bodies, because the only way they can influence us, especially light beings, is when we're not fully in our bodies. Like every portion of our light quotient held by the beauty of our love, source love, God is love. Remember that. So if you're only meditating by going up, 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 you're never ever had an experience when you anchored yourself into the presence of Earth, Mother Gaia, because she is your ally. Because you are on her, you're on her body, you're with her. She is your ally and you are hers. And a lot of beings don't understand that we work with the planetary life force. That's why we have to have a unification with the planetary life force. So with you going only into the life force cannot flow through you. And as you know me, I'm a tantrika teacher, which means a tantric teaching is a teaching of life force and how to generate the currents of Holy Spirit life force through the body. And that's what actually makes us become integrated beings. It's not a sexual thing, Tantra was distorted, was another one of the levels hijacked, because Tantra became just this perverted version of groupies and things like that, everyone doing it with everyone, and it's distorted again. The original teachings, what Tantra is, it's the juice of life. It's life force. It's the vitality that comes from spirit that then becomes different aspects when you're kind of pulling it in your body, because that vitality makes you a strong being. It makes you firm in your body. That's why I am the way I am, the way I radiate light. You can be a tremendously beautiful being, but you will look exhausted. You will look depleted. That's how I look when these beings were doing these experiments of light on me. And I had to find such a, through that experience, such a tremendous power of love for this body. Even though the body was so violated, I had to love it so much so the body could start strengthening again. So the unified ascension, first, we need to understand it's a spiral. You don't have to work for it. It naturally works through you when you open up to the principle of it. And the principle is very simple. And it's universal principle. And it's not just a part of the sacred society for a few. No, it's cosmic. It's the way we descend and then we ascend, and we create densities of life and then we ascend back through them. And we return to the presence of, let's say, a higher composite of who we are as a higher divine intelligence. But we need to love that which we now call the lesser experience. And there's a lot of people who don't love the human aspect. All these light workers, oh, the human body is torture, it's terrible. I understand that especially many in the Christ lineage have had tremendously painful experience in the body. My mother had this as well. She's of the Christ lineage. I had them as well. But we have to find a way through that, because on the other side, when we start working with life force and bringing these currents of tremendous vitality, our bodies can be, and this we're going to talk about at the end, they can be reconfigured to a new template. And that's what they're trying to prevent so hard now. That's why there's so much psychic attack. There's so many beautiful, like younger beings now, they're waking up and they're being tremendously oppressed because they have such tremendous power and uniqueness just by being themselves, just by becoming the full power of who they are. They don't need to do something specific. You know, a lot of these ladder waves, they just need to be. They just need to radiate. They don't even need to do things like that, you know, waking people up, sharing the truth, you know. So the same thing goes for meeting forces of darkness or forces of oppression and control. These agendas, entities, all of that. There's a lot of videos on psychic attack, how to deal with it. And a lot of this is like an instant moment when this is happening. But I want to talk about it from an eternal principle of life, like Spirit is showing me. So the darkness, again, cannot be fought with light versus dark. You contain yourself in the bubble of duality, and it will continue to persist in the status quo as it is. But darkness can only be met within divine equality. What does that mean? When the light and darkness are equal, that means you're standing, you're sitting, you're holding space from a presence of love. Love is magnetic. Because it's magnetic, your light is electric, it can hold, right? That's where you need to understand both polarities of life, right? So through love, you're holding the space. And in that space, remember, Jesus the Christ said in his book, the book of love, that in the presence of all these levels of love, because love has different means of expression, right? We've talked about this before. The uttermost, purest, immaculate design love is all the aspects of love that we know as humans. And when all of these, he said, coexist, no darkness can coexist in this space. And that's how we actually shift timelines from these hijacked timelines and such. So one other thing is joy, is pure joy. The darkness absolutely knows no humor. They don't understand. But I'm not talking about like jokes, you know, things, you know, you might say, well, they have their own ways. No, I'm talking about the pure humor. You know, like the fairies have this humor. This pure, innocent, childlike humor, goofy. I call it my goofy self. So the next thing I'm being brought for, to my next point here of importance, is the importance of the elementals. Because when you're ascending, you have to ascend every aspect of your density, which relates to an aspect of dimensionality. If you don't know what that means from the, specifically from the 13 layered perspective, this is the most beautifully explained in Amora Quanyan's book, Affinity. In that book, Affinity, there's a description of all these aspects of ourself and how they relate to the 13 nature of dimensions, dimensional layering. So all of these need to be infused. The spirit needs to penetrate through all of these. That's when we're truly an integral sovereign being. That's when we can become the cosmic Christ embodied. You might speak it, you might affirm it, you know, it's important. But this is the way, this is a dimensional infusion. That's why I always say Ascension is a multidimensional reality. Ascension is always multidimensional, which means in the body. You're not going anywhere, but you're bringing a dimensional infusion through your body, which means that when you're going deep into the root, you have to go through the elemental nature. So even what we know as dark magic, because darkness is so good in using that, they're using forces, energetic forces. They're using the elemental forces and sending light through them, but they're actually governing these elementals in a negative, controlling way. Many of the light, and this is again what Susan spoke about so beautifully, do not know, and they're kind of getting ungrounded, and they don't want to be part of Earth. And the human is such a dense thing. I don't like to be human. I prefer being a light being. We've all said that sentence, and not once. We're all guilty of that, and it's a part of our learning, because the more love we're bringing into our human experience, the more we're loving the human, the more we're loving the body, the more we're becoming light beings, because love anchors the light. So the importance of elementals is they will help to build the strong foundation for the body. So when you're going out in nature, you're not just going out in nature for a walk. I do that all the time, but I'm being consciously now reminded. Ask them, ask the beings, ask the elementals to help you, especially now when I'm in this new body training protocol and new strengthening of the body. Because the body, my body's now reconfiguring to a whole new template, or how do you even say that? So the importance of the elementals, I'm going to give you my example. Like yesterday, I was meditating by this waterfall we have here, and I called in the elementals, and the moment I called them, and you usually call 3 times, they came, and I felt them. They're always singing, and I felt them. I heard them singing, and they were saying like, we're making rainbow circles, we're making rainbow circles, and I could see them like making like rainbow circles around my body. So they're helping to reinforce our physical nature, because the body needs to be strong. That's another reason why people think you need to constantly do fasting in order to see the visions of God and be in alignment. When you're fasting, yes, you can tune into other realities. And some people will do it through using recreational drugs. Never really good, as you know. Some people were using teacher medicine plans. But when you're not an integrated being yet, what this can cause is you can become a suicidal, because you have this amazing awakening experience. You see oneness, you see love, and then you're just trying to recapture that moment. You're trying to, again, remember that. You can't feel it. Like you're chasing the feeling. Remember that. You're chasing the feeling instead of bringing gradually that feeling to the body, because the body cannot like explode all at once. It needs to be approached layer per layer. That's the dimensional fusion. It needs to be gradually built as a strong, firm vessel for this work, because we're now shifting timelines into new reality. So you're always going to experience these challenges, and none of these things are good when they're used in an inappropriate way. That's why people always say you need to seek a proper teacher, because you can say to someone, well, I'm a shaman, I can do that. Well, you might have a shamanic lineage, you might be a galactic shaman, but when you come on earth, you first have to become physically capable of understanding the elements. That's why many who are really shamans, not the fake ones, the charlatans, these people can sometimes even shapeshift and do things like that, like amazing things. And that's their legacy. They have that like in the bloodline. It's like natural for them. But just saying I'm a shaman, but you're not even in your body fully. In order to be a shaman, you have to be in your body. All the levels of dimensional consciousness need to be in the body, right? So they know that. They have the teachings, but they wouldn't share them with just anyone if they're not ready, because it can just create more distortion. It's almost like if you're just trying to wake someone up with the light, and you bring them so much information, it will overload them. It will overinflate them or overwhelm them with too much. That's not the right way. Remember, you need also to hold things in the space of love. There needs to be this equality. So, equality plus, what do we say, humor, because they don't like it. You're going to see when you're goofing around, being silly, you will feel like you're in this impenetrable bubble. That's how my mother is. She's always like this. She's like this beautiful, illumined child, and she never has any interferences, like doubts, things like coming to her, because she's always in this immaculate bubble, and it's amazing to see that. So call in the elementals, call them for support to help build your body, strengthen your body. Like in my example, just recently, someone from my group, my friend, was telling me, she was noticing because we were joking, and she was like, wow, you're so funny. And I'm always like, when people tell me this, I'm like, people always think I'm serious, but it's because, on YouTube, I'm not like this, because I'm with the teachings, and that part is reserved for only people who really, get close to me, when it's intentional, and it's how it's supposed to be. And she's like, you're amazing because you're such a highly integrated being, but you're so humorous and pure, like innocent state. And I call that the integrated self, because I'm dimensionally infused in balance. And I do connect to this fairy side, this fairy playful nature. I'm always with them, and they're always with me. And I embed that into my physicality, because I understand all these levels are what makes us who we are, cosmically speaking. That's what God is. God interpenetrates all these layers. But if we refuse and deny any of these, they won't be a part of our experience, which will make us weaker than what we can be as our full embodied strength. So I live this way, and also what they showed me is why I lived in this place, why I was so called to be here in this beautiful mountainous space and region for so long. and being in the presence of these pure forests and waterfalls is because they told me I was very important from a position of what I do here on the planet, so they needed to keep me locked, like secret and hidden. But at the same time, my body was connecting to the constantly rejuvenating force because I'm doing a lot and I constantly need to purify, like with working with these energies, you know, you do need that. And when you're in presence of these waterfalls, especially water, you know, water can hold, I think Susan said this beautifully. She said water can hold more information than what we now have in our computers. And that's true. Water is organic computer. So when also what they showed me when I was here and doing my embodiment work and my remembrance, I was also infusing the water. And the water that stirs here with the waterfalls is the purest, and then it goes and it enters into, you know, other places and other regions, and it's just covering up the ground. So don't forget that, okay? Now, the last thing I want to talk about is this higher perspective about these entities and these timelines, because I will often see people who become overly obsessed with this. There's either ignorance of that, like it's not happening, and you're thinking it's just a part of you suppressing you, but it's actually an entity or an outside source, or either through psychic attack or just like always there. And it's an agreement or an encoding. Sometimes it's even related to a DNA lineage that you have. And you might experience it like it's yours, but actually ties into some of your ancestors, right? That had this hooked in, and you're still hooked in, right? It is what it is. The higher perspective about this is that, like I said, a lot of people would give it more power and more credit than it actually deserves. And I'll explain why. When you become aware that there's an entity, and then you start like experiencing it every day, and you're just like, there it is, and it's influencing me, and I can't do that because they're always there, and you become just a part of the reality. Their choices become your choices. You're no longer a sovereign being. You're doing what they're basically bidding for you. They're telling you what to do, or not allowing you to expand into. There is no other choice but to become awake, and then by knowing that this is here, moving through it, like in every way. This is when I told you before, you have to have a tremendous will and desire to be fully free. If you don't have that will, it won't happen because everything we were taught is that everything has free will. The light has free will, the dark has free will. So from the higher perspective, what they were showing me is that there's an inception of this that also includes this timeline with all these entities, and we're just like doing the psychic attack and learning how to shield ourselves and all of this. But there's still something behind it that we're not seeing as a clear picture, that this is actually also a collective initiation through the dark. So from this collective initiation perspective, it means that it's a part of our collective experience, because mostly we're still in that timeline. We're allowing it in by saying, oh, it's just how it is. They're always there. These demons are always there. You know, they're always going to coexist with us, this and that. But that's what they showed me. They showed me that because our bodies were wired in a certain way, aligned with like our brain. I'm going to go to the brain. Our brain, as you know, it also has here in the back a part called reptilian brain. And through the reptilian brain, there's a lot of these lower based emotions and fears that align us with these agendas, right? We call them the black suns and Belial suns. So from this perspective, until our body is still, there's a part in our brain still locked into that reality. We're still pulling in that timeline, even though we're a light being and we're very much focused on the light and on the love. We haven't yet done the body, like full body awareness. And this is what I'm doing now, and what I'm being trained into through the pulsar light intelligence. I actually gave it my name today. I asked them if I can name it through the words that it contains, and they gave me this word. Pulsar explained as particle, unification, light synthesis, activation, recalibration. Because what it does, it activates and increases, and it actually accelerates the particles, and it infuses something in your brain, and the brain starts to, with that synthesis procedure, because the synthesis occurs through the spiral movement, it starts to recalibrate the brain. And this is what I'm being trained into now, because it's our bodies. Like that's the first step, right? Loving it, creating a field of love. But then the next step, the next advancement is creating the new bodies that will be aligned with the new timeline. And on this timeline, because as you know, a lot of what we know as the astral plane or astral fields, is already collapsing, is dissolving, because the more we're holding unity, the more people holds this unity, the less power we're giving to these beings. So we're helping ourselves along the way, right? We're becoming aware. We're doing something about these entities and forces or demonic, whatever they are. To me, it's just like, it's just a part of what this timeline was imbued, right? But there is a higher perspective. It was a collective learning. And a lot of these things tie, especially the light worker lineages, incarnations, tie it back to very ancient times. That's why they exist there for so long, because it kept us on being a transference through the programs, through the energetic impulses through the blood. And last year in December, I did this video on Patreon. I explained the true decoding of the blood and what the blood of the Christ truly means, as is a part of releasing through what we call pain and suffering. But you have to acknowledge it at such a deep level through Christ, and this is what the Christ resurrection is, that this actually unlocks you from these programs like the Anunnaki program, the reptilian programs and such. So the higher perspective is that we're actually needing to, even though we're aware that this is happening, we're not supposed to give it power, because it's not as powerful as we often think, because a lot of people get very freaky or freaked out about this, and they're just feeding into that timeline, which is just keeping your body always aligned with that. So it's almost like always playing a ping pong game. One day it's you, one day it's darkness, and you're like passing this game like on and on. And a higher perspective, once you become fully embodied, you start working within the body, creating a new template and a new field. Your body will start to reconfigure, and this is what they showed me. The body will start reconfiguring now back to only having, like, a new spiral is created to the cosmic golden light ascension. And this is what's happening. This is what I'm doing now in my body. All the challenges that I've had in my personal experience led me to this point. And I'll be able to teach it and pass it onwards. So there's a new timeline implementation, and we're conscious creators, and that's what they don't want us to remember. That you're choosing your reality, and you keep saying, yeah, but this exists. Yeah, it exists. You have to deal with it. You find on every level when you're growing an aspect of you that will learn how to deal with it. But then eventually you're going to have to come back to a point of synthesis, do the unification process, and become much more than you thought was available for you as a human being. So this astral collapse is a part of that, because less and less people feed it power, less and less beings are becoming their full sovereign selves. So this new timeline implementation is leading to a new reality, a new human template, aligning and creating a new human design. It has nothing to do with what the New Age gurus are now talking about. Yeah, Homo Divinicus and AI infused, and get away from all that, because they were designed for that. They were programmed to feed you information that is false and align you with artificial intelligence. This is the natural body language. This is the body's organic intelligence that it starts to plug into through this spiral. So Pulsar is the way that they're teaching me, these higher light beings, and part of my own team, and they're showing me this, and I'm doing this now every day. I do this activation, and I'm going to start teaching this work on Patreon. This knowledge is a higher knowledge. I cannot teach it publicly on YouTube. I'm very sorry, but as you know, YouTube is a force of many infiltrations, many people who are also stalker people, spying people who don't know why they're actually even there. A lot of them are controlled. So those of you who really wish to, take this work and take an opportunity, I'm going to start, it's going to come in many parts, because there's a lot that this includes. So I'm going to start the training probably this month. I know it's already probably towards the end of the month, but still. So I invite you to join if that's something that you would like to one day master, which means you feel you're somehow on this timeline. But ask Spirit, always ask Spirit to show you where you are, or what preliminary work you're supposed to do first, because it's something you cannot speed into. It's like not something you can force into. It's like you need to build a steady amount of light quotient through this love synthesis, holding the light, anchoring light through love, holding the space, and then this starts. This is like an accelerated process. It's a more advanced process. So for those who are already with me on Patreon, we will start soon. And for those who are not, thank you for being here on YouTube with me. And for those who are maybe one day will be, thank you for joining in advance. So thank you for all your love, support. I love all of you so very much. As you know, I'm always here to offer my highest support, but I do work a lot, so I can't be with everyone individually. That's why I do things in a group format. So that's that. I'm sending you so much beauty. Remember, honor the beauty, because we need to see the beauty. beauty anchors us into this dimensional reality where we're doing our work at this time. So take care, and as always, with so much love and power, big hugs and kisses. Bye.